strange to come and do this again, but it's my pleasure to come because I feel like I'm sharing something that God is working through with me at the moment quite deeply. So I just want to say that this preach is mostly for me. You're allowed to listen in, and if you think some of it applies, by all means take it on board. But it's mostly for me because it is part of what God is really fundamentally putting his finger on at the moment. So if you sometimes feel that you don't get that balance of work and rest right, if you sometimes feel like you're on a hamster wheel and you don't really ever truly relax, I can see some sniggers in the in the group. If you ever feel like sometimes there's just not enough time, it's hard to stop, hard to put things down for very long. And if you haven't really ever kind of got to grips with the idea of Sabbath, the idea that this is meant to be part of our lives as Christians, then maybe this message is also for you. Is there anyone in the room who would disagree with this statement, that society is characterized by hurry? It really is, isn't it? Computerization, wonderful invention though it is, has increased exponentially our ability to action things more quickly. Now here I am showing my age. In the old days, I never thought I'd say that. In the old days, if you wanted to make a transfer at the bank, you would get in your car, drive to the town, park my car, go to the bank, possibly wait in line to get to the cashier's desk, and then I would make the transfer. And now, we all do it, don't we? Open the laptop, phone, click the button, make the transfer, boom, done. 2 minutes. Sounds wonderful. Save all this time, right? But the subtle expectation that everything is faster and faster, I believe, makes us feel like we have to do more and more and more. When my parents courted, they did so via letters for 3 years before they even met each other. Amazing, right? They took the time to write their thoughts on paper, walked to the postbox, posted them, didn't expect a reply for several days, knowing it had to get there. They had to have time to reply and write back. Now, we write a text, voice note, and we expect an answer in minutes. Technology is wonderful. God has given us the ability to produce things that have made our society wonderful in many ways. But it has accelerated the pace of life. And it's really caused, I believe, a premium on speed. We now have to have everything quickly. We're more time pressured than ever before. We can communicate and share information more quickly than ever before. We've got smartphones, we've got social media. We're constantly in the loop. We're constantly connected. We compress response times and we expect rapid communication. We're bombarded by information, notifications, messaging. It's so hard to find peace and quiet. It just doesn't just feel faster. It is faster. In business, the key aspect for success is innovation speed. It's all about how quickly can you get innovation to be adopted, new technology, get things out more quickly. It's gone from being quality and efficiency. This has led to fast-paced work culture, time management to be more effective, be more productive, deliver things more quickly. That drivenness means that people are working longer hours and meeting tighter deadlines. A study in 2007, apparently, I found out that everyone's walking 10% more, or 10% faster than they used to. And that was 2007, so I don't know what it is now. Is this good for us? Have you heard of this? FOMO. The fear of missing out. The pace of modern life has put a kind of pressure on us to get everything out of every single moment. That enjoyment is about living in the fast lane, making your life count. But it can lead to engaging in too many activities and overscheduled diaries. To do more, to be busy. The vicious circle comes when we do finally rest, and then we feel guilty for not being productive or wasting time, because our brains have been trained to be productive and do. We admire people who can get a lot done in a short amount of time, who can carry lots of things. I know sometimes people say that about me, and now I cringe when I hear it, because I don't believe it's God's best for me. We look for time-saving hacks, ways to get through our to-do list more quickly. Now, is work a good thing? Absolutely. Is it God's idea? Absolutely. But I can't see anywhere in the Word where it says, be busy. In fact, God speaks against being busybodies. It really is something God's really highlighting for me right now. We've got a load, something that God has given us to do, to take responsibility for. But when we add to it, we're adding burdens. That's not what God's spoken for. And that becomes a dangerous place if we do that often and for long periods of time. It causes damage. I think social media has a big part to play, where people, I guess, have come to that pressure to kind of look as if they're doing a lot with their lives, to demonstrate that they're successful, to keep up, to show what they've been up to. Even the concept of bucket lists, they're not harmful in themselves, but they kind of create a false pressure that you've got to do lots of things before your days are up. But who knows when our day's up? It's only the Lord that numbers our days. I recognise for me, some of my busyness is created by perfectionism. I have to have it just right. Today was a little bit of an example of getting my preach right. And it caused pressure on me. It causes me to spend longer on things that perhaps God has given me, but I'm taking too long with them. I think also busyness is sometimes driven by a subconscious and subtle pressure to fill your minds and days with things so you don't have to think about who you are, where you are, and who God is. I can't help feeling that sometimes that's the enemy's agenda. So while work is good, it's a gift from God, it's a purpose He's given us, we do need to live well, wisely, responsibly, but is busyness really how God wants us to live? What's the impact? It can lead to many of us struggling to keep up with demands of daily life, feeling overstretched, never able to relax, tired all the time. We get into information overload and we can't then think clearly. We don't have headspace. Does anyone relate to this, having had this at times in your life? Yeah. It can lead to emotional overload as we try to manage all our responsibilities and maintain relationships, and take care of ourselves and find that elusive work-life balance. Then it can lead to poor eating habits. You lack the time and energy to make good meals, or skip meals, or reach for something for convenience. And then we have health issues, which add to our anxiety. Then it's hard to find time for exercise, and we know we need to do it. And even when we get to put our head on the pillow, and sleep evades us. Because actually what's happening with overload of stress, you've got more cortisol, which increases our heart rate and stimulates the brain. making it hard to turn your mind off and actually relax enough to fall asleep. If anyone's experienced that, those nights of tossing and turning, we all know why sleep deprivation is torture, right? Something you might not even think about is that a stressful life actually leads to more accidents because we get distracted, fail to pay attention to our surroundings, and it's one of the leading causes of car accidents. Ultimately, it's this: a life of stress and hurry leads to a lack of peace, and a lack of peace steals our joy. It's borne out in the statistics. In a YouGov study in 2018, they looked at stress levels in the UK and found this: 74% of people reported feeling so stressed they felt overwhelmed and unable to cope at some point in the last year. 74%. Only 7% of young adults hadn't experienced that. So 93% were reporting intense emotional overwhelm and all the things it led to: unhealthy eating, drinking, smoking, etc. 16% self-harmed, a third had suicidal thoughts. Many reported feeling lonely. Maybe we can relate to some of those things too. And the causes were what you would expect: the health issues, which probably are caused by the stress; debt, where we try to keep up with everybody else; pressure to respond to messages, that was actually one of the identified causes; comparison, body image, appearance, and a pressure to succeed. It's 5 years ago, that study. I wonder if things got any better. Of course, we've had a pandemic in the meantime, and for a time, many of us maybe did put things down and really enjoyed that sustained period of time. There may have been other challenges, but a time of actually more rest, perhaps. But have we really learnt the lesson, or have we gone back to life as it was before? So what is Sabbath? I really am convinced now that Sabbath is God's antidote to all of that. It's meant to be an oasis of peace and rest to reset each week. First of all, though, I want to say what it's not. It's not just a day off. You know, I think it's obviously difficult for people to do shift work, to find where they have that time, but a day or two off is probably the norm for most people, isn't it, at the weekends? But that doesn't mean it's Sabbath. How many people have had a weekend and have felt so exhausted afterwards that they've wanted to go back to work for a rest? Yeah? I can see the smiles. You can relate to that. It's not putting down one load to pick up another. I don't know how the young families cope. I don't. I'm not being a parent. I can imagine that on a Friday when you finish maybe your other work, that you pick up the work of family and it feels full of schedules of sport activities and trips to birthday parties and outings and things to keep the children busy. Or even that, are we meant to keep them busy? We're perpetuating the cycle if we do. And for those of you with young children below school age, I don't know how you do that. Because you can't just say, all right, I'm just stopping being a parent for 24 hours, sort yourself out, and I'll see you in 24 hours again, okay? It doesn't work that way. Special wisdom is needed to know how that looks for you. I really appreciate that. And that's where we've got to go to God to know. But it's not just a day or two to catch up on the jobs that you haven't done all week. It's not for that admin. It's not a day even to chill. Although chilling might be part of it. I believe God's Sabbath is much more than that. Because he role models Sabbath right from the start, doesn't he? It's right there in the beginning. In the story of creation, we read this amazing work of God, and by the seventh day, God had finished the work he'd been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. Then he blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. He rested from the doing, and he delighted in what he'd made, declaring it was very good. He blessed that day. He made it holy. He role modeled it, and then he instituted it. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. You or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Let's remember the context here. They had been in slavery in Egypt for hundreds of years. A slave never gets a day off. They work 7 days a week, all year round. They were doing machines. When God took them out of that, he affirmed their sacred value as made in his image. No longer slaves. And he gave them a day of rest, which was totally countercultural to the times. He instituted Sabbath and declared it was a sign of their liberation. And it was so important, he made it a capital offense to break it. Observe the Sabbath, because it is holy to you. Anyone who desecrates it is to be put to death. Those who do any work on that day must be cut off from their people. So it is a commandment. We often forget that, don't we? Somehow we've got, as Christians, we've got into the pattern of thinking the 10 Commandments are really, really good rules for life. And we can do 9 of them and think, oh, yes, that's absolutely right. Yes, we can't, we don't have idols. We don't blaspheme God, dishonor our parents, murder, commit adultery, steal, or lie. Oh, but the Sabbath is just kind of, it's a bit of an optional. But why? Why have we got into that thinking? Why have I got into that thinking? If you are feeling convicted by this, just remember, I'm feeling convicted more than anyone. So it's a command. Let's settle that. It's a command. It's an obligation. Oh, but it's not just that. It's not a rule, another rule. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to take the weight off our shoulders, to do less, not more. It's an invitation to get out of the fast lane, to run counter to the culture and let everything else pass by. It's an invitation to reset, to see things clearly. Take time to delight in what refreshes and recharges us, and let God adjust our vision where needed. It's an invitation to pause and breathe. Just be with God and be with others. When we observe the Sabbath, we show we're not of this world. We're not succumbing to the pressures of the culture, but we're doing it as a declaration that we're deeply loved by God for who we are, not what we do. It's a way of affirming that God is the source and the center of our existence. For the Jews of Jesus' time and now continuing, everything was geared to Shabbat. It's the culmination of the week. The day before, they have a preparation day, so that day is given to prepare, to make sure everything's in place for Shabbat. When you visit Israel, you'll see how seriously they take it, where they even have lifts, that you don't have to press the button because they stop on every floor. They don't work, they don't drive, they don't answer phones. And it's a day for family. But guests are also very, very welcome. They will start their Shabbat on Friday night until sundown on Saturday. It will have a service in a synagogue beforehand, and they will light candles in the home. They dress up for Shabbat. This is if you're a more traditional Jew. They will sing hymns, and then they will say a blessing over the wine, sanctify the day of rest, and there's a washing of hands for the bread. In the most traditional families, someone will present a thought about the Torah, and the children will share their knowledge of the Torah portion that they've been looking at that week. So everyone's involved. They sing songs of joy and gratitude, and they say grace. At the heart of it, it's family coming together in community, honoring God and thanking him for the blessing of Shabbat. The greeting they use for this day is Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, peace. Sadly, though, the religious leaders didn't leave it just there. They added many restrictions to try and preserve this Shabbat. And those restrictions actually became a burden rather than a blessing, a list of do-nots that bound them actually rather than a day making it freedom. Here are some of the rules. You can't carry more than a dried fig because that would constitute work. But you could carry half a fig 2 times. Okay. Cold water could be poured on warm water, but warm water couldn't be poured on cold water. You can't travel more than 3,000 feet from your home unless it was a Friday before the Shabbat, and you had then placed food at the 3,000 foot mark, and then you could go 3,000 feet beyond that because where you put the food was home now, and you could go beyond. Women, you couldn't look in the mirror because if you found a white hair, and you might be tempted to pull it out, and that would constitute work. You can't examine your clothes as you get dressed because in brushing or shaking you might kill an insect, and that would constitute work. You couldn't tie a rope to your bucket at the well, but you could tie a knot to your wife's girdle, that's waistband, on the Sabbath. So if you needed water, you tied the rope to your wife's girdle and then tied your wife to the bucket. I know, I don't get it either. Sadly, I've even heard of stories where people have let their houses burn on Shabbat because they didn't want to break the law. The only exception was if a person's life was in danger. But if you just broke a bone, even if you had a bone sticking out of your skin, that wasn't going to be life-threatening. So you just had to put up with it for another day and deal with the pain. God gave the law to Moses with quite a lot of commands, 613, it's a lot. But then they added to them. And when Jesus came, he boiled those down to 2 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. And then in Romans, that gets boiled down even more. He who loves another has fulfilled the law. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. But the religious leaders, they went the opposite way. And I really think Jesus actually came, one of his major parts of his mission was to replace their understanding of the Sabbath. That's why he did so many things on the Sabbath, I believe. He taught on the Sabbath, he delivered people on the Sabbath, he healed, because he wanted them to understand Sabbath was life-giving, not life-restricting. They made it so legalistic. Because he says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And there's a lesson for us in this, isn't there? About being careful what we also add to what God said. In the Christianized world, well, we've made Sundays our Sabbath and combined it with worship. but a lot has changed over a short time. When I was a little girl, I went to church in my Sunday best, and all the shops were shut, no exception. We spent time visiting family. It was a quiet day. I was never told that I couldn't work, but there was definitely an understanding that certain things don't happen on the Sabbath. It was very disapproved upon if someone was mowing their lawn, for example. They shouldn't be doing that on a Sunday. I think it was more about legalism, though. I suspect, though, today, how many people would even know what we're talking about if we said Sabbath? Some businesses do close on a Sunday still. And it's wonderful when you hear some of the stories of businesses who have deliberately refused to do any trade. And there's companies like Chick-fil-A in America where they have made it a principle that they don't do anything on a Sunday, and they've been blessed beyond their competition, which are lovely stories to hear. So there are businesses that still give that time off, but is it Sabbath they're respecting? And of course, many have now decided all days are open. All days they're ready for business. You can understand it makes sense in the natural if there's staff to work and if there's customers to buy. Why wouldn't you? But then, haven't we gone back to the slaves of Egypt, where one day looks very much like another? It's not God's best. So I want to present 4 of the main principles of Sabbath that we learnt about an emotionally healthy spirituality course, which have been really life-changing. And the first one is stop. An act of trust. Sabbath is actually an act of faith, an act of trust where we are countering that essence of the sin of Adam and Eve, not to trust and respect boundaries. We stop on Sabbath, not because we've finished. We stop because it's time to stop. Let's be honest with ourselves. There's always something else to do, isn't there? Who dies with an empty in tray? But this thought I found quite scary. If we refuse rest until we're finished, we will never rest until we die. I'm going to say it again because I think it's one that needs to be taken on board. If we refuse rest until we are finished, we will never rest until we die. Sabbath liberates us from the need to be finished. We stop not because we are the masters of our lives, but because God is. He is our Lord. And if we don't lead our lives, we need to be led. We need to be led with God's boundaries, observing his rhythms. By observing the Sabbath, we are saying we can trust him to provide everything we need without our contribution. We do that every night when we go to bed, don't we? Why not do it for 24 hours? Principle 2 is rest, an act of surrender. It's an act of surrender because we recognize that without our efforts, the world will keep spinning and we're not indispensable. The universe will actually manage without us. It dispels the myth that we are in control. At this time of the year, I'm sure many of you have had conversations with colleagues and friends, and you talk about the holidays. And I know some people just get so over-focused on where they're going next and what they're going to do next year. And it's like all they're living for is the next vacation. And that feels really sad because God has actually instituted a holiday once a week, 52 weeks a year. It's a holiday, 52 snow days. Do you remember what snow days were before we had home working? It's our time to be refreshed and recharged. What do you do on your holidays to rest? Do that once a week. Resting is our way of reminding ourselves we're human beings, not human doings. He's not a slave master. He's the good shepherd, and I love that we sang that song. He's the good shepherd who provides. He makes us lie down. He leads us beside quiet waters. He restores our souls. He's Lord of the Sabbath. Now, it does take some planning, and it may take a lot of readjustment for some people. You may have to think ahead what you need for the day so everything's in place. But we prepare for holidays, don't we? Why not prepare for Sabbath? How you work it out is up to you and God. But start. If you haven't already, I encourage you, start. Make a plan. And what is that rest? What do you find really saps your energy? Rest from that. Do you find being overscheduled saps your energy? Have a day free of plans. Be spontaneous. Do you have a heavy workload? Take a nap. Play a game. Read a good book, like you would on holiday. Are you drained by being in a hurry? Take your time with everything, every meal, every cup of coffee, whatever you do that day. Take time, have a stroll, smell the roses. Are you drained by worry? Prepare for what you have a part to play in, and then give God the rest. Put worry on pause. Do you need to rest from multitasking? Do one thing at a time and enjoy each moment. Do you need a rest from talking? Find time for silence and being on your own. Do you need a rest from technology? Turn off your devices. Put your phones away. How many people are gasping now? What? What? Not look at my phone all day. Do you know what? We used to manage with that quite well. We got amazing things done in the old days. Oh no, sorry. But it's true. We used to manage. It actually is a great way to stop us having an inflated sense of our own importance and the need to know and the need to feel needed. Put them away. Do you need to rest from decision making? Go with the flow for a day. Do you need to rest from being beholden to meet the demands of others? Tell everyone you're not available. Block out the diary. Enjoy saying no. Do you need to rest from being productive? Find something to do, to play. Have fun. Revisit childhood sources of fun from earlier years, which achieve absolutely nothing but that fun. Principle 3, delight, an act of joy. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but if I get myself into a cycle of working all the time and I haven't given myself time off, my joy just seeps away. Life becomes a drudge, feels like a never-ending list of demands, and I lose my peace. I start feeling like a slave. I stop enjoying even the things I normally enjoy. In the truest meaning of Sabbath, I think God wants us to reconnect with joy and delight in Him. In Isaiah 58, at the end of the chapter, there's a couple of lovely verses about when you call the Sabbath a delight, when you honor it and you take delight in the Lord. He says, I will make you ride on the heights of the earth and I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob. Sabbath is a day to delight in creation, beauty of nature, the miracle of our senses, and all the good gifts God has given us, including each other. It's a day to notice, pay attention and delight in everything, with gratitude for the gift of life. Last principle, contemplate, an act of adoration. Underlying the theme of Sabbath is the call to make a day holy to the Lord, set apart for Him. Pondering the love of God is the essence. It's a day to be with Him, worship, pray, feast on the Word, and simply enjoy His presence. It will look different for all of us, but God knows your heart, that you want to be with Him, and He will help you make that happen. I really believe that, because it's all about Him. It's a day to Him. If He's not the central focus, then really we're probably just having a day off, not Sabbath. With Sabbath, we reorganize our week to recognize that the Sabbath is the culmination of the week. Just as actually Christians, we orientate all our days, to reorientate to the reality that they culminate in eternity with Him. If we love God, Sabbath is the day we love Him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love and be loved. Be filled with and by Him. It's the fuel we need for every week. It may take time, you may have to experiment, but make the first step. I know that since I have decided to address this, I feel the shift myself. I'm really not good at stopping. I'm really bad at resting. But I have now finally, after how many years, finally given myself permission to stop and rest. And God is teaching me how that needs to look. It's His priority, and now I'm making it mine, which has meant I've had to reorganize quite a few things about what my week looks like from now on. It's very early stages, but I'm enjoying it. I feel like this pressure is just coming off my shoulders, and I'm not carrying things in the same way anymore, with a sense of feeling like a slave. In Hebrews it says, "There remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from His." Sabbath is at heart an act of devotion, where we declare that our lives are rooted in His finished work, not ours. It's a way to actually demonstrate the truth of the gospel. We can rest because He's done it all. Can I get an amen? Sabbath is God's gift to us, and how we spend it is our gift back to Him. Lastly, I really believe that Sabbath is a foretaste of heaven. It's a prophetic promise of what awaits us, a glimpse of that glorious celebration of eternity when we will always be with Him. It puts our earthly lives back in perspective. Earth's not our home. We're always looking forward to that fulfillment of God's kingdom and our final Sabbath rest. In Sabbath, in a way, we're practicing for heaven. And what we will be doing there, we will join with the angels and the multitudes from every nation in worship forever. This weekly Sabbath just gives us a foretaste of the glorious joy that is to come. Thank you.